Are you looking at picking up your first turntable, not wanting to go with a brand new turntable? I know a lot of people, they really want the aesthetics of a vintage turntable, and I definitely get that. My recommendation is always Technics. It has been ever since I've been open. There's so many of them out there. And today we're gonna go over 5 or 6 that I've recently picked up. And I'm gonna go over what I do when I buy a Technics turntable, what I look out for. So maybe it can help you if you are out garage sailing, hitting thrift stores, things that you want to look out for that could keep you from making a bad purchase. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's look at Technics, maybe the best brand in vintage turntables ever. Here we go. Let's go. Let's go. Today, this video is sponsored by skylabsaudio.com. We've got lots of great shirts, hats, slip mats, new vinyl records, products by Grado, Advanced Paris, Audio Technica. It's a great way to support the channel, and we really appreciate it. Skylabs has been open 8 years. We average around 100 vintage turntables every year. We buy and sell so many Technics that I know what to look for. I know what's available for parts. I know what's a nightmare to try and fix. There's going to be some really good tips for you at the end. We're going to look at some parts that are being repopped, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And the first turntable I have to show you is a Technics. This is a Q300. These were made in the mid-80s. A lot of times when these come in, I actually don't even test them. These have been so reliable for us. I'm planning on putting a new cartridge or stylus on it anyway, and it really comes down to whether or not it's operating at speed. And for being a budget or entry-level turntable, this is one of my favorites and one of my recommended automatic turntables. It seems like by the mid-80s, Technics really kind of streamlined everything. They figured out how to make automatic turntables that weren't overly complicated and that had a lot of issues. And usually these work. The only thing we've seen with this series is sometimes you'll get a bad motor. As long as you have an outlet, you can figure out if the motor's turning and if it's running at speed. Don't overlook these mid-80s Technics. They made a lot of them. There are a lot of them out there, and you can usually pick them up really cheap. Even on eBay, I think you can grab one of these with shipping for about 120, 130 bucks. And you've got a really reliable table. Here's one thing with Technics that you have to watch out for: the dust cover hinges. And they are known for breaking. This plastic is 40 some years old or 30 some years old. It gets brittle. There's a good amount of friction on there from these hinges. Here's another tip for you with the dust covers. I've had this happen several times. Somebody will call and they'll say, hey, I've got a Technic, I'm looking to sell it. And one of the first questions out of my mouth is, how are the tabs on the dust cover? And a lot of times they'll say, they're great. They're not broken, they're not snapped. They show up with the turntable and all of a sudden they've got a snapped hinge. And what they did was they drove to the store with the dust cover attached, and in transit, all that vibration and bouncing snapped the dust cover. I believe them when they said that it was intact before they left their house. Unfortunately, they didn't pull the dust cover off when they drove it here, and now they have a snapped dust cover, and this really hurts the value quite a bit. Nobody wants a non-working dust cover, and you can see where that one had been snapped. This is really common. The fortunate thing with this issue is people are starting to make metal brackets. And this is kind of a process. It's not easy. It's kind of tedious. What you do is you take a Dremel tool with a cutting wheel and you cut off this clip. And then you shave these braces down. This will get mounted, and that's how you're going to get your vintage Technics turntable dust cover to work again. Because right now, every time you go to close or lift this lid, it's going to snap on you. So that's one thing you want to watch out for. If you're out and about and you're buying a vintage Technics turntable and the tabs are still good on it, when you drive it home, take the dust cover off. It'll save you this and a pain in the butt. And a couple things with this Q300. You'll notice there are holes 2 holes in the top of the platter mat. It's really important that they still have this platter mat because you need it in order to use this turntable. These are essentially feelers. What happens is when you hit start, these little nubs come up and bump the record. That way, if you have a 7-inch or a 45 record, if this one comes up but this one doesn't, the turntable knows it's a 7-inch. If neither of them come up, you know, they're hitting a surface or they're hitting a record, then the turntable knows that it's a 12-inch record. This is how the turntable determines whether or not you're playing a small or a large record. The other thing with this line of turntables is they are a P-mount cartridge instead of a 1/2-inch mount. This is good and bad. It's really good for those out there that have maybe never owned a turntable before, or maybe a little bit intimidated by the setup process of a tone arm. This P-mount system really just alleviates the need to set it up at all. It's almost set from the factory, and any P-mount type of cartridge you buy will fit on this tone arm and already be set up. They're all the same weight, essentially. And so replacing the cartridge on a P-mount turntable couldn't be any easier, really. There's another thing we see quite often with this age of Technics. The ground cord was removable, and so are the RCAs. And this is good and bad. It's good in that if your RCAs go bad, you just buy some new ones. The problem is you never find these ground cords. Usually this ground cord is long lost. Maybe the person that owned it didn't know where it went and they just discarded it. The nice thing is, again, there are people out on eBay that specifically make a ground cord that will fit your Technics turntable. So it's just a matter of jumping on eBay and grabbing a new ground cord.
What happens if you run it without the ground cord?
Big
Buzz,
hum, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you need that ground cord. I wouldn't run it without it. And the Q300 isn't going to win any beauty award. This isn't a showpiece or anything like that. But again, if you can grab one of these in really good condition, working for $100, they are rock solid turntables. I couldn't recommend this table enough. There is a belt drive version of this as well. And if you have the choice, personally, I would go with the direct drive, but the belt drives are really solid as well. They're just really, really good, well-made turntables, especially for the price point they were at and what you can get them for now. Don't look past them. If you're looking for a solid player, mid-80s Technics. I don't think you can find anything better, honestly. The next one I've got is an SL-Q300, and I see a ton of these. This might be our most sold vintage turntable. They just sold so many of them. And the SL-Q300 is a belt drive turntable. You've got a 1/2-inch head shell mount cartridge. You've got a counterweight. You've got anti-skate. The same issues with the dust cover definitely apply to the 220. But again, as far as reliability goes, it doesn't get much better than this. These things just usually work. One thing I do want to point out with any of the turntables we look at today, if you are out and about and you're looking at one that hasn't been refurbished, maybe it's been sitting for a long time, and you'll see that person will say, that's been in our basement for 20 years. If you go to move a lever, whether it's the queuing up and down lever or an automatic function or any of the levers on the turntable, and they give you resistance, you need to stop. Most of the internal parts in these Technics, at least from the late 70s, early 80s, are plastic. If maybe the grease and oil has dried out on one of those internal moving parts and you give it too much pressure, you're gonna snap the plastic. I've seen it over and over again. And this is what you see. There should be a queuing lever right here to raise and lower this tone arm. And that grease and oil under here probably got dried out. It probably got sticky, and somebody went to force it to get that tone arm to lift, and it snapped the plastic on the inside. And while you can disassemble this and then get a new cam off eBay that will lift this tone arm, it's a pain in the butt. And you better know what you're doing, because a lot of times you really have to disassemble this quite a ways just to get to that cam. My best advice to you, if you're buying a turntable and there's a moving part on it that's not wanting to move, just stop. Either get in there and clean out whatever needs to get cleaned, or take it to somebody that can do the service work for you. But most likely you're about ready to break something if you force it. I've learned it the hard way several times. And if you grab one of these turntables out there, a receiver or anything like that, and you get stumped, head over to our Discord channel. We've got a lot of really good technicians there that are really wanting to help you out. Figure out if it's something that you can handle on your own, or is it something that you need to take to a technician to get fixed? We'll have a link in the description down below for our Discord channel. You definitely want to join that. And one thing with a belt drive turntable, a lot of times when you find these and they've been sitting for a while, the belt will actually be disintegrated. You'll see it laying in here under the platter, and it's turned into like a gooey type of substance that gets everywhere. This one seems to be in good shape, and the belt seems to be in good shape. The other thing you want to check for is definitely check the speed. This Technics and a lot of other Techniques you see out there have a variable pitch control, and that's just for fine tuning it. This one also has a strobe, so you can see that it's either running fast or slow. And the way you adjust that is you turn the speed dial until you get those lines straight. And you see how this is wavering quite a bit as I turn this. Most likely this turntable needs to have these pots cleaned. I'm going to see if I can even get it at speed at all. And since I can't get this one to settle down, I'm going to assume we've got an issue here with a motor. It's not looking good right now. It's way too erratic to be just a dirty pot. Yeah, so this would definitely be one of those turntables that I would not pay much money for. That speed is just not stabilizing. I've worked that speed pot back and forth several times, and it is just way too erratic to assume that it's just a dirty pot. And I could be wrong. You know, we will go ahead and clean those pots just to verify to make sure, because it really doesn't take very long to do that. If I was buying this unit, I would be looking at it as it could potentially be just a parts unit. If you took this to a technician and they had to order parts, most likely you're going to be upside down in it. These are the types of things you want to find before you buy them. I bought this lot in a collection, and I knew the risk that some of them might be parts units. And this is definitely one of my favorite and your favorite turntables. When you all voted on your favorite semi-automatic turntable, I think this one won or was second or third. It was up there, and I agreed with you. The SL-D2 is just this thing's a workhorse. They're really well built. They've got good weight to them. It's got a good tone arm, great motor. These are just one of the most rock solid turntables that you can pick up. And this one has our broken dust cover tabs. That's what I mean by it's more common to see them broke than it is to see them in one piece. And it's unfortunate. This one's gonna polish out really well. It's got a few scuffs, but there's no major cracks or anything like that. So I'll actually end up installing these aftermarket brackets on there to make this one functional again. I'll plug it in, let's see what the speed's at, and see if the auto return function's working. But if I were a betting man, I would say this thing's gonna work just fine. Yeah, we're holding speed pretty well. Any variance in that, I'm going to assume is that potentiometer that just needs to be cleaned. But these SL-D2s they're one of the most reliable vintage turntables I think you can get. And there's auto return right there. The only things I would be looking for when looking at a SL-D2 is this tone arm lever. These like to get broke off because they hadn't been used in a while and somebody went to pry it too hard and it snapped. So you want to check for this. You know, the other possibility would be that, you know, you might have some bad cables on here. Replacing these, it's not the hardest thing in the world, but it's also not as easy as like on the Q300 we looked at earlier. They usually have their feet intact. There are some turntables that are notorious for feet rotting. This is not one of those turntables. I don't think we've ever had to replace the feet on an SL-D2. And one other tip that I would give you on these, you always want to clean those contacts on the inside. There are 4 little contacts that line up with the 4 contacts on the head shell, and those do like to get dirty. They have a spring pushing those contacts against this head shell, and what I do is I just spray a little bit of deoxit in there, grab a small screwdriver, and just kind of push those contacts forward and backward, and then reseat the head shell and make sure it's tight. They've got a nice heavy platter on them. They've got a good motor. Oh, hey, I got something to show you. I got something to show you on this one. This is perfect. I was hoping one of these would have this issue. When a turntable sits in a non-controlled environment, this is what happens. This is called rubber leaching. I think it's from heat. I could be wrong, but the oil in that rubber starts to separate from the rubber, and you'll find this oily type substance all over your platter, and you can see one side is malleable or pliable and the other side is getting really hard. I've seen them to where they start to crack. They split into pieces almost like a pizza, and it's because all of the oil has leached out of the rubber and it becomes just a brittle piece of plastic. So if you see this, that's what's happened. And it's not really the end of the world. You just want to clean that off, and most likely you're going to need to find a replacement rubber mat because this one is essentially just shot. You can get a really cool one from Skylabs, by the way, either acrylic or felt. There isn't a turntable manufacturer that I haven't seen a leaching rubber mat. It has nothing to do with Technics. It has to do with the rubber and it being too hot for too long. SLD2, get you one. The last two turntables I got for you, these are ones that you really want to be extra careful with. These are both record changers, and for those of you out there that aren't familiar with record changers, essentially you could stack, in this case, 6 records on a spindle, and it would play one through, drop, play the next one through, and drop the next one. There are a lot of moving parts in these. I usually don't expect them to work when we get them. I don't know if either of these are going to work. Let's give them a test. They're 40 years old, and really, they both need to be gone through new oil, new grease in order for them to be reliable, but their Techniques, we have a pretty good shot of both of them working. So let's see what we got. The one nice thing about these specific models, because they have such a big dust cover, they did actually improve the way the dust cover mounts to the turntable itself. So we don't have to worry about broken tabs on these. One is a belt drive, it's an SL-Q300, and the other is a direct drive, and it is a SL-1950. Both are fully automatic, obviously. Both are untested, so let's see what we get.
That thing's got some dust on it. It's a dusty cover.
That's a barn find right there. One big tip for you, if you do see one of these turntables out in the wild, there are 3 rare parts that can be worth potentially a good amount of money. Each one of these turntables came with a single play 33 1/3 center spindle, and sometimes you don't get them. The other piece to look out for, this is the 33 1/3 stacker. These are pretty rare, and then this one is the one that might be worth more than the turntable itself. And this is for your little 45s or your large hole records. And we're gonna give all 3 of these a try. See what works and what doesn't. I'm gonna grab some records that they're just kind of throwaway records. So if I don't handle the records with the proper care, you can let me know down in the comments how poorly I'm handling these records. And if you haven't heard the extended version of Tall Cool One by Robert Plant, you're in for a treat. I don't think Robert Plant listened to this. I don't think it would have gotten released. It's that bad. Looks like all of our movements are good. That's good. Let's go to 33. Let's hit start. Here we go.
Got good speed. Ooh.
Yeah, and this is kind of typical for what we see with, automatic turntables. It might be holding speed, I don't know, because it picked back up again as soon as it dropped the tone arm. So I'm gonna wiggle these knobs around and see if we can get it to just play through long enough to find out if the speed's good, because we can't even tell if the speed's good right now. Let's try it again. Round 2.
Nope.
Yeah. So as of now, this SL-235, it probably needs completely disassembled, new grease, new oil. something's tripping up on the inside. It's not allowing us to even play one side of the record. If it were me, if I didn't know how to work on one of these, I wouldn't buy it and expect to get it running unless you kind of know what you're doing. There's a lot of moving parts on the inside of there. You know, even taking it to a technician, you might have a pretty hefty repair bill. I say we go right for the gusto on this one. Let's just put the stacking spindle on and try stacking some records. So let's put Robert Plant on here, put the Beach Boys on top. That always scares me.
Yeah.
It looks like it's just gonna fall right on top of the tone arm.
Take it to the end of the record.
Whoa. Oh. Yeah, this one's not working either, you know, and unfortunately this is really common. I don't know what it's gonna take to get either of these working, but you know, there's just so much going on the inside. I always say it kind of looks like synchronized swimming. You know, there's a bunch of gears and pulleys and everything has to be perfectly working, or the record drops before the tone arm can get out of the way and it hits the tone arm, or there's a lot going on there. You know, now we have Spotify and playlists. My goal is to put on 6 records and then go do a bunch of work and just let it, you know, I'll just put on a streaming service and let it do it. There's one other thing we could try. I do have some 45s, so maybe we should try the 45 spindle adapter. Just for shits and giggles, let's try the 45 adapter. If that works, I might keep this turntable just as a...
It's like a jukebox.
It's like a jukebox, yeah. I'm just gonna pull out the first 2.
What do we got?
Sammy Hagar, Mas Tequila.
Classic.
Classic. And Savage Garden, I Knew I Loved You, the acoustic version.
10th time's the charm. So move it. Oh, there we go. Keep going.
Oh.
Well, that worked. Looks dialed in now. Hey! Mas Tequila!
Mas Tequila.
I think this turntable has had Mas Tequila.
Yeah. Let's try the 33 1/3 one more time. That gave me hope. Come on. Come on. Oh. Oh.
Come on. Do it. Yes! Up here.
It worked. I don't know what the percentage would be of, you know, 30 times trying this. You know, it's definitely nothing I would put out on the floor saying it works, but it worked. That's pretty cool. So I think the 1950, we'll go ahead and do a little bit of relubing and greasing and see if we can get that more consistent. I might keep it as a 45 player, honestly. I don't like selling these. There's just too many variables for things to go wrong. I like things to be more consistent. So hopefully you got something out of this. Hopefully if you are out and about, you remember some of these things to look for if you are going to pick up a vintage Technics turntable. And, you know, there's always great advice out there on our Discord channel and Audio Karma, stuff like that. So if you got a Sunday afternoon and you're willing to get advice from people and maybe do a little bit of tinkering, take the bottom off, you might be able to become a vintage Technics repair person. Who knows? It might lead you down a whole different path of what you thought you might like to do with your life. It happened to me. It hasn't happened to Eric yet.
Not yet.
Soon. We'll get a soldering iron in his hand one of these days. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. Enjoy your summer.
Stay cool out there. It's hot.
It's hot. Thanks. So one thing a lot of people are So one thing you can do if you are looking at, one thing you can do if you're wanting to know if the speed is correct,